Hi everyone. This is a session hosted by MOFGA, the Maine Organic Farmers and Gardeners Association, on using cash flow projections, especially in planning for major infrastructure or other types of expenses on your farm. My name is Nicholas Lindholm. I'm the organic marketing and business specialist here at MOFGA, and I've been asked to host this, and I am pleased to be joined by Hannah Hamilton from Buckle Farm. And we're kind of planning this to be kind of informal, kind of just a stroll through cash flow projections and kind of pointing out ways that we've experienced, the usefulness of cash flow projecting, in particular, using the information that a spreadsheet gives you to make decisions on what you can or can't afford, what might improve your bottom line, even if you spend money to do so. So I'm going to speak for probably 15-20 minutes or so with some introductory comments about cash flows and kind of basic financial 101 level for those who might not be familiar, especially new farmers who are not familiar with cash flow projections, and eventually get to a sample cash flow and show you some of what I was just mentioning, how they can be useful and help you make good decisions. And then I'll pass it off to Hannah, who will actually speak to how she and her husband, Jim, at their farm have made some pretty significant infrastructure investments using cash flow projections to help make those decisions. And if you find that green button to share my screen, I do have some slides to share. Let me just adjust kind of where the screen is. So here we go. This is me. I am the marketing business specialist for MOFGA, but my wife and I also are a certified organic wild blueberry farm, Blue Hill Berry Company. We're up in the Blue Hill Peninsula, and we've been certified organic from MOFGA since about 1997, and growing organic wild blueberries and marketing them off our farm, and currently manage about 50 acres, harvest about 30,000 pounds per year, and sell half the crop to one of the large freezers that buys certified organic wild blueberries, and market about half the crop pretty much direct to consumers. And I am part of the farmer programs team here at MOFGA. For those who aren't familiar with everything the farmer programs does, this is one of the things we do. Educational and training programs, but we offer technical support, which is like farm visits, any type of advice. We have 2 crop specialists, a livestock specialist, a beginning farmer specialist, an experienced farmer specialist, and I'm the financial business and marketing specialist. So one-on-one assistance, farm visits, phone calls, Zooms, that's all part of what we do. We also just share resources with each other, with other organizations. I'm, often just referring people's questions to if I don't know the answer, I'll refer them to other experts around the state as well as around New England. A fair bit of what I do also is compile useful business information, market report, price reports. I put together our department newsletter. And a few of us also administer some different funding programs. I do the technical assistance grant. Anna Mueller has recently done the soil health grant and the produce safety grants. And MOFGA also administers an organic farmer loan fund. And a lot of work that all of us in farmer programs at MOFGA do is collaborative with other partners here in the state and in New England. And that includes like NOFA Vermont, Maine Farmland Trust, Land for Good, Maine Extension, Vermont Extension, such and such. So that's a brief overview of me. I want to take a few minutes to do a brief interview then of cash flow statements, which is what we're kind of focusing in on today. And kind of emphasize something that I, as a farmer, didn't realize until I became a farm ag service provider, and how important allotting my valuable time to, let's just say, desk work, to financial planning, to office work is very important. These sorts of things like a cash flow statement also include, in this, I would also include income statements and balance sheets and even enterprise budgeting. It's a way to get good decisions made for your farm. You can make bad decisions based on bad information, and getting meaningful, good data is what you really want to make meaningful, good decisions. And cash flow statements are one of those great tools. I mean, it's almost like your favorite hoe or your favorite cultivating equipment or whatever. A good understanding and facile way of like accessing and using something like cash flow statement is really going to help you, because that good, meaningful data will lead you to good decisions. And I can't emphasize enough how important it is to carve out time. At least someone on your farm team and the management level should be allowing themselves appropriate time to do some type of financial spreadsheet work. And it doesn't come naturally to us. Most of us got into farming because we liked being, outside and growing plants, and maybe even at market, meeting customers, selling food, providing, healthy food to our community. So the inclination to sit in front of a computer or work with spreadsheets may not be the first impetus, but I'm going to just speak from personal experience that, the record keeping part, especially being a certified organic farm where I was forced to keep good records and show them to my organic inspector, that's where I started to wake up to this reality. And it took me a long time. I've been farming 25 years. My QuickBooks is still a mess. I'm not saying like, oh, do as I do in any sense, but it's from experience. I like, as a farm, that I know I could have made a lot better decisions in the past if I had been as good at understanding and utilizing things like cash flow statements 20 years ago as I do today. So just my pep talk. And now just kind of a brief overview for those who aren't familiar with what a cash flow statement is and where it fits, and kind of what I'm proposing, that everyone doesn't need to become an expert at bookkeeping, but here's kind of like one general nugget that I think is important to kind of at least become familiar with. And I try and repeat this at any opportunity I can, speaking to farmers about financial record keeping. Know that there's kind of basic three general pieces to good business financial record keeping. And this is true for whether you run a garage or a sawmill or a shoe shop or a farm. These are general bookkeeping, record keeping pieces across the board. Any accountant will know what these three are. And I just encourage all farmers to become familiar with what they are and how they live in a good business. So the income statement is the first one, the balance sheet is the second one, and today's topic, cash flow, is the third one. The income statements, they are something that are used to analyze what happened. That's basically looking back. It's usually a year, a period of time, that actual transactions, and that's things that you bought, things that you sold, that you record. It's a spreadsheet, and you can analyze them for meaning. You basically are recording all your sales, and in some cases, what your cost of goods that you sold were, that has different meanings for a farm than it does, say, for a garage. But the expenses then need to be totaled on the income statement, and then you subtract expenses from sales income for that period of time, and you look at your net profit or loss from both the core operation of your farm, but then other activities too. So that's just kind of a breeze over of what an income statement is. The second piece of these three pieces is the balance sheet, and that's created to analyze what you have, what you owe, and what you own at a given time. And that's your assets, your liabilities, and then the equity in your business. And again, another way of saying that is what you have, what you owe, and then what you actually own. And in general, these two pieces of financial record keeping are for businesses that exist. When you're starting a brand new farm, you kind of have to do some sort of planning and predicting. But generally, you produce an income statement annually. You produce a balance sheet almost at any time. A balance sheet is kind of a snapshot in time at a given day. And they're used to analyze how an existing business is performing. Now, kind of the unique thing about the third thing, the cash flow statement, is that they can do kind of both. For a business that exists, you can do cash flow sheets that kind of look backwards on a period of time, usually a year. And it actually will, show you kind of like your bank statement, what actually happened as cash came in and cash goes out. That's kind of the general gist of what cash flow statement means. It's how and where cash comes in and how and where it goes out. But then, so the second piece, and this is kind of where Hannah and I are going to be covering the next hour, is about projecting. And they're usually called cash flow projections. What could happen, what can happen, what you want to happen. It's a cash flow spreadsheet that looks ahead to a period of time, usually like next year. But you can also build out multi-year cash flow projections of where cash is going to be coming in, where you anticipate it, where your sales want to grow or shrink, and then where expenses, where you might invest in something, where you might buy a new piece of equipment. And so businesses that exist can still do this cash flow projection, but as well, it's for businesses that are new or still developing their plans. Boom, boom. So yeah, from that, I'm going to jump to my actual screen. And I have a couple samples of some cash flow sheets. And, all right, wait, I just need to get out of this one. And jump there. You can see I have a bajillion tabs open. I'm that sort of person. Okay, everyone still see my screen now? And now it's just kind of a blank cash flow template. The our beginning farmer specialist, Bo Dennis, developed this along with Ryan Dennett, who's the farmer programs director. And this is part of a whole spreadsheet of tabs that Bo shares out through the JP program, the Journey Person program for beginning farmers. And I really like this blank template. So I won't spend a lot of time in this, but again, kind of as an introductory to those who haven't seen spreadsheets or aren't all that familiar. The structure of a cash flow is generally the same, but details within it will vary from farm to farm. So as I go through it, I can point out where yours, this may be appropriate or this template may fall short. But so some of the general kind of, if you will, scaffolding to a cash flow sheet is across the top. You have the months. And so each column represents what happens in those months. And going down the left-hand column is what we'll cover a lot more next week in the same kind of series that Hannah and Jim Buckle and I are doing on your chart of accounts. And most farms, I would coach to have their cash flow chart of accounts be the same as their income statement. That's jumping ahead a little bit, but for now, suffice it to say that the cash flow template starts with your sales. That's where money's coming into the farm. You kind of itemize those row by row, and then you total them. And then below the sales, you itemize all your expenses. And that can be broken up in many different ways. This template has the variable expenses first, and then totals them, and then has fixed expenses, and then totals them. And here's where this template, is very minimal. Like those won't be all of your variable expenses. You're meant to add in rows. And if you're a poultry farm, you're not even going to have seeds. So again, this is just kind of a blank template as a place to start and get an understanding of what gets covered in a cash flow sheet. Scrolling down, sorry if I go too fast or make people dizzy, but towards the bottom of a cash flow sheet, you'll find where the total expenses are subtracted from your total income or sales above, and that's usually what's called the cash flow from operations. That's your core farm operation. The money came in, you subtract the money that went out, and that's totaled just above where some other activities, which would include things like grants or loans or owner's draw if you take money out at the end of the year for yourself. And these activities I generally classify as ones that are not core to the operation of growing and selling your farm products. It can be, for some farms, a very extensive list, and for some farms, a very short, small list. But finally, after you total up all those, other incomes and other expenses, you finally have your net cash flow. Those other activities are added or subtracted. And at the bottom of, say, the January column, you will have a dollar amount, which then gets carried up to the top of the February column. So you'll notice the row at the top is beginning cash, and the row at the bottom is usually called ending cash. Yeah. So the ending cash on January 31st, it's just like a calendar, is going to be your beginning cash on February 1st. So there's, in a good spreadsheet, especially of course on a computer, it's going to have formulas that carry all those numbers for you and do all the math and totaling for you. Now, certainly you can do cash flow templates on paper, but the idea here is that this is literally how cash is moving in and out throughout the year. So I'm going to pause for a second because I did see a question, and Hannah replied that she can talk about this. I'm just going to read it aloud because I didn't quite read it when I first saw it. What are some of the common errors beginning farmers make when trying to put together their cash flow projections? That is a great question, Courtney. And I can address some right now as it's kind of fresh from what I was just going over. But Hannah, you'll probably pick up on some. And when I jump to my next slide, I'll probably pick up on some others. But I would say some of the biggest mistakes some farms make is making a mess out of their chart of accounts, out of how this left-hand column is organized. And often what happens is, like in income up at the top, they'll put in that, that small grant that they got, or even a big loan, or some other type of income, and or under their expenses, start putting in some non-farm expenses like a loan payment. And in my sample, that'll really kind of stand out why it's important to kind of draw this line right below, right above the other activities. Literally, when I make a cash flow statement, I draw a green line, and I often do this on my income statements too. And I talk about above the green line and below the green line. And this green line, basically above it is your core farm operation. And again, that's what your business of farming is producing and selling. And then below that is where you want to put things like your grants and your loans or your loan payments, interest payments, credit card fees, stuff that is definitely important and often affects how your farm succeeds. But the really important data, the meaningful data that I'm after, I want to just see the core farm operation. Because if a simple example would be you got a grant or a loan, and that's what's making your farm profitable, like that's how you made it through this cash flow crunch this year, that's telling you something which won't be obvious if you have all that stuff up above in the core farm operation. You want to be able to look at your core farm operation, growing and selling vegetables. Let's just keep it really simple. And if by, from January 1st to December 31st, you're showing positive cash flow and a small profit or even a big profit, that's good news. That's what you want to know. And especially that's what you use a cash flow projection for, is to make sure that the core farm operation is paying for itself through the year. And if it's not, then that's when you jump down to the lower other income, other expenses, and see how that may help or be hurting the whole operation. I'll just pause for a second, both to get a drink of water, but to say, please interrupt at any point, whether in the chat or feel free to just speak up too with a question. I'm more than happy to be interrupted. But now I want to share an actual fake farm. I actually based this off of an old cash flow template of mine from my farm from about 12 or 13 years ago. I changed a few of the numbers, and I've set this up now to make a few real clear points, but I just wanted to be clear that this is kind of fake, but I know what I'm talking about, and it's based somewhat in reality. But I also have tried to make some pretty simple places where now in the next 10 minutes, I'm going to point out how using cash flow projections can be useful in planning for some infrastructure investment. As a brief kind of story introduction, I just call this Crazy Wild Blueberry Farm. And I have two samples. This is sample one, and I'm calling this the complacency cash flow plan. This is like looking ahead to next year. Like we're going to plan on kind of just things were good this year. We're happy with how it went. And we're going to kind of stay the same, not plan for any major changes from what we did this year, sort of cash flow projection. And some things I would point out, starting with the sales. As a blueberry farm, I organize the sales basically by sales channel. It's only a single enterprise. So, splitting up how we sell it, whether retail, wholesale, and a few different grades, or whether it's fresh or there's some frozen. Throughout the year, I've got some frozen sales through the winter and early spring. There's kind of a lull in sales through early summer. And then when the harvest kicks in late July, that's when the bulk of the sales happen. So you kind of get a sense of, again, as a cash flow, where cash is coming in month by month and by channel. And in this case, it's a pretty small farm. Almost $41,000 in total sales is planned on this complacency cash flow plan. So just, a little perspective, it's kind of a small farm, probably a single operation, maybe 10 acres of wild blueberries, and pretty simple sales channels. Now to scroll down to expenses, here, there's kind of a lot more detail than that blank template I shown. And this is more, what reality looks like for most farms. There's some organization that I like to create in the chart of accounts for expenses that includes general and administrative. That's kind of overhead. And then I've got some other head, like parent categories, operating expenses. Those are kind of your variable expenses. Definitely the expenses directly linked to the core farm operation. And below that will be repairs and maintenance, which is a category that sometimes is directly like variable to your farm operation, but sometimes repair and maintenance can also be overhead, like you're fixing a building and things like that. So that's a category that kind of lives by itself. And labor is also a pretty big category that lives by itself on most good analytical cash flow and income statements. So all that just to bring you down to the total expenses. And here you'll notice the total expenses are 36,600. So, as a cash flow projection, we're looking at about $4,300 profit. That is net profit. That's income over expenses. So, all that looks pretty good to me. One thing I really look at carefully at a cash flow projection is that month by month cash flow from operations. And you'll see here from month to month, January, February, March, April, that cash flow is a positive number. And that's what I really want to see too. A negative number means you're bouncing checks. It means your bank account is gone below zero. That's intolerable. And that's one of the biggest reasons to use cash flow projections, to show you, oh my gosh, if you in your cash flow projection have a negative number, that means you're unsustainable, that you're going to be bouncing checks more than anything. And so this farm looks, like it's got a pretty solid plan. It's okay up to this point. Now here's where the green line is that I talked about. So everything that we've just looked at is the core farm operation. But down below, we scroll a little bit, and I come to some interesting information here where under other income, they actually have got $8,000 coming in January from private investment. This is probably like grandma had, fortunate to have some money and is willing to loan them a little bit. And under other expenses, you'll see across here, they're starting to pay that off. That's paying off that loan. And I put this in there because it was needed, for one thing, because without it, I'm going to do some live changing. If I take that $8,000 loan out of the picture and then scroll up just closely above the green line, you actually start seeing negative cash flow starting in April into May, at its height in June and July. Now, notice that still the core operation at the end of the year still makes $4,350, but it's the cash flow that is in trouble. The farm itself is still on solid ground. It's just the cash flow through that, especially that May, June period, when, if I go back up to the top, you'll notice there was very few sales. So they realized that looking at their cash flow plan, they needed some cash injection to get through that slow period. And so that's before, before this webinar, I saw that, okay, if we injected $8,000, let's just say a loan from grandma, that actually makes a complacent cash flow plan. And I want to then kind of take that to the next plan, which is a little more bold. It addresses some of these questions of cash flow and negative cash flow, but also addresses the growth of the farm. Like, are you complacent with just kind of a pretty thin margin of profit? And could you imagine paying yourself more? If you look closely at where I've have the owner taking a payment, they're only paying themselves pretty small amount. I will say that wild blueberry farming, especially at a small scale, is only a part-time job. You're not going to get your income from it. So I'm going to assume that this farmer has off-farm work and is just paying themselves during the busy, like April, you're doing field work, July and August, you're doing the harvest, October, you're also doing like pruning fields and stuff. So I would love to see them have more profit than the $4,350, especially if they can afford to pay themselves. So that's where I'm not happy being complacent with this farm. And I'm going to push them into this next sheet, which I call the Intrepid cash flow plan for our crazy wild blueberry farm. Now here, it's pretty much the same cash flow. You'll notice I changed very little. The only things I changed, you're going to see in red further down. But I wanted to kind of start at the top to show you that it's still all the same sales right now. Still the same $40,950 in sales. I kept all of these expenses the same. And there's a few that I'm changed, but I'm going to first jump down below the green line to show you what I kind of wanted them to think about doing. And this is where we're getting into using cash flow to plan for infrastructure investment. So I'm proposing this farm, instead of being complacent, they be bold and they say, you know what, we're going to get a loan from the Farm Service Agency for $10,000, and we're going to buy one of the walk-behind mechanical harvesters that are available here in Maine for wild blueberry farming. The person who makes them requires a 50% down payment when you order it in March, and then 50% when you pick it up. And so I show here in red, under the other income and other expenses, we get the $10,000 in March. We put 50% down, and then with when we get the machine, we get another 50%. And then with the Farm Service Agency, this is something that actually my wife and I did. We took out a loan and we set up payments with them. They're very farm friendly, that it's only a once-a-year payment. And for us, it's best to have that payment come after the wild blueberry harvest. So that's what I show on this other red line, is the loan principal and loan interest in December. And here it's just like $3,300 for this year's loan. And so that'll probably be like a 4-year payment to the Farm Service Agency to pay off that $10,000 loan. But again, the cash flow is just this 1 year. So this year, we're just looking at $3,300. So the $10,000 loan, and then the $10,000 that we pay the manufacturer of the walk-behind harvester zeroes out. So the only new addition to this Intrepid cash flow budget is this $3,300 loan payment. And remember, we did have $4,300 in profit. So I'm pretty sure like the Farm Service Agency, which again is pretty farm friendly, will look at these cash flow, see that, that looks okay. Like we can make that work on this business operation. But now I want to go back up above the green line to show what impacts this mechanical harvester will have. And it will have a couple significant ones. So here we are back up in the operating expenses for the farm. So the mechanical harvester is a gas-powered machine. It's a Briggs & Stratton engine. So it's going to add a little bit of expense to my gas, fuel, oil budget line, particularly when we're using the machine, which is just used during the harvest, July and August. So I added a few dollars into the July and August gas, fuel, oil, just to run the machine. A significant thing that happens, though, is in our labor budget. And here's where, yes, machines can replace people. So in the complacent plan, I think there was 3 part-time employees helping during the harvest. This machine can readily replace 2 out of those 3 part-time employee positions. And so a significant savings is cut out of the employee budget line, such that at the end of buying this machine and using it, even in the first year, our cash flow from operations is now up to $9,110. that's almost double the 4,300 that we have. So by actually investing $10,000 through a loan in this piece of equipment, we're cutting some savings. We're also doubling our net profit. I want to lastly point out, though, to those who are astute, and I know it's probably hard to read a spreadsheet, but the cash flow itself still faces that issue. So we didn't, this cash flow sheet, the Intrepid one doesn't include grandma's $8,000. So we still have negative cash flow June and July, according to this as it is. But notice how much smaller it is. Again, because of the savings that we've realized, instead of the $6,000 or $7,000 negative cash flow through 3 or 4 months, we're now just looking at a smaller problem to solve. And again, this is a problem that you have to solve on paper. This is why we do cash flow projecting. So you can say before June comes, like, oh crap, we're going to run out of money in June. We got to do something. So, hopefully if you're building a cash flow projection for 2024 in September, October, November, this time of year, you can see this now. And so I'm just going to finish my presentation now by saying, this now is such a small challenge. I think it more readily creates kind of the creative, like, gear turning in my head. I say, oh, okay, I got to come up with a couple $1,000 here before June. And what I see, my mind immediately goes to marketing, and I see most of their, I'd say, like, what is it? At least half their sales, 22,000 out of 40,000 total, are fresh, in-season retail, like direct to consumer. They must have either a farm stand or they go to farmers markets. This to me is a great opportunity to kind of lean into that local customer base who knows your farm. And I would propose to them that they look to raise at least a couple $1,000 in May, like as a pre-sale CSA type of fundraising. If they have a farm stand and or a farmer's market email base or mailing base or phone, if they can somehow directly reach out to some percentage of their customer base and ask them to engage in a pre-buy CSA type program in May, then that might be a place where they could raise $3,000. So if I put $3,000 in May that they raise, and then take $3,000 out of August, because it'll still be the same dollar figure. We're not increasing sales or production. We're just moving when we raise that money. So if we get $3,000 in May, and that changes then in August, we only get $13,000. Our total for the year is still the same, $40,950, but that totally solves our cash flow problem. That influx of cash in May gets us through June and July with positive cash flow. And that's exactly something that my wife and I started doing about 10 years ago, exactly for this cash flow problem. And it worked well for us because, especially in May, one of our biggest expenses, if you don't mind me scrolling down, is pollination. We bring in honeybees and bumblebees in May to pollinate the wild blueberry crop. And that was a great selling point for our introducing this idea of pre-selling and wanting and needing to raise money for our farm to help pay for the honeybees. Just came, as a natural kind of ask in terms of a marketing sense. And these days, we actually are raising now $10,000 to $15,000 in April and May with this pre-order idea. So I'll pause there just to say cash flow projecting, not only helps solve some cash flow crunch ideas, but can spark, even some new marketing ideas and things like that. And I like, working within kind of the black and white numbers and columns, finding these kind of highlighted points. And I actually love using Excel or Google spreadsheets with the colors. You'll notice a lot of my spreadsheets have colors, no matter if I'm trying to make a point or not. It's just, it brings it alive to me. And there, again, is just a lot of great, meaningful data to be mined if you're kind of of the mind and desire to kind of to organize it and then look for it and find it. It's there and can help strengthen your farm in ways that you couldn't imagine without this information. So that's the end of what I've prepared. And I'd like to hand it over now to Hannah. Let me just check yep, nothing new in the chat. I just pause for a second too, if anyone had a question to shout out.
Nicholas,
Otherwise,
I'd like to pause before I start talking and use the restroom. So if I could call a 5-minute break, I'll be right back. And if
that
anyone
sounds
has
great.
questions, you can answer them, or you could put them in the chat and I can answer them before I start.
Sure. Or why don't I just say we'll all take like a 5-minute bio break. That sounds good to me. I'll pause the recording and we'll just jump back in 5 minutes or less. I'll still be here. So there is a question that came up in the chat that I just wanted to quickly answer. And Hannah, maybe you have some too, but is there a basic template that recommended to a new person to use? And I have several that I like a lot. The one that I showed you that was the blank one at the beginning was developed by folks here at MOFGA, and I share that out. There's a woman in New York State, Faith Gilbert, who is an independent farm service provider. She works with small farms, primarily in the New York and Vermont area. She has an amazing spreadsheet too, that is Excel based. And I often share out her enterprise budget or cash flow. And then there's Rose Wilson in Vermont, who is another independent farm service provider, who works a lot with small and especially dairy farms in Vermont, who also has a suite of amazing spreadsheets. And I often share out her template. At a real beginner's level, I really like the one that MOFGA has. That's the one I would kind of first and foremost put out there. Though usually when I'm working one-on-one with a farm, I show them at least 2 or 3 and let them choose. But often I find the one that MOFGA uses with the JP program to kind of be the simplest and a good jumping off point. Is there a link to the MOFGA sheet? I don't believe so, though I have it in a couple different forms that I usually send out, like as an Excel or a Google sheet. So the easiest way is to get it through me, and I will just share my email in the chat. And if you just send an email to me asking for some of these spreadsheets templates, I'm more than happy to share them out. Oh, Hannah Hamilton from Buckle Farm. Take it away.
Cool. All right. I'm about to share my screen. Give a heads up if anyone has a hard time seeing what I'm doing. All right.
Yep, looks good.
Looks good. Okay. So my name is Hannah Hamilton. My husband's name is Jim Buckle. He's not here at the moment, but he might actually burst in at any moment. So we run the Buckle Farm, which is in the town of Unity, which is on the ancestral land of the Penobscot people who are part of the Wabanaki Confederacy. We grow certified organic vegetables, some cane fruit. We have some apple trees that our feral children and do what they want. And we focus primarily on selling to a range of wholesale accounts. So that includes food banks, selling to other farms that have either farm stands or large CSAs that they need to source some outside crops from. We sell to a distributor, and then we do some direct sales to stores and restaurants, a little more specialty. So it's kind of a range of different types of wholesale buyers. We started in 2014, and we tried to do a little bit of everything. We tried to grow a little bit of every vegetable. We were selling at farmers markets, and we had a CSA. We were trying to serve wholesale customers and restaurants, and different types of stores. And we learned, over the course of about 4 years that we really needed to refine our business and focus on our business, and come up with a simpler model that would work for us. And we ended up shifting away from the direct to consumer, focusing on wholesale. And that's been a really great transition for us. So this season, we have about 15 acres in field crops right now. We have about 4 acres in cover crop. And our top 5 crops that we really grow in high volume are onions, potatoes, winter squash, beets, and broccoli. A couple photos. Potatoes and onions. We love potatoes and onions. So I'm going to focus a lot less on kind of the bone structure of a cash flow projection and just more on things we've learned, things to keep in mind, and our kind of personal perspective on takeaways from starting with no experience with cash flow projections or any kind of like accounting, enterprise budgets. We started with such little experience. And now we have a cash flow projection spreadsheet that is the most detailed that I've seen. But I've totally come to love what it can do for us. And it has definitely changed our business and really helped us, plan for some of these big transitions that we have made. So first and foremost, I think the biggest piece of advice I could say is start simple and take small steps every season or every chance you get to, take some time at a computer and educate yourself and think about what you need. Like Nicholas said, you could literally write a cash flow projection on paper with pen and pencil. It would, require a lot of calculation. But the next step is a spreadsheet. And our very first cash flow projection was even simpler from the JP sheet. And we were being coached through it, and they could see that we just needed the most basic version of a cash flow projection. So it wasn't really broken down into very specific categories, but it was a really good introduction to just what a cash flow projection is. And over the years, we've gotten a lot of help, learning how to make a realistic cash flow projection. And obviously, your own farm or your own business's data is kind of the best tool you have when you start, looking back on what you actually have been making money on and how you've been making it, what time of year, and your expenses. So if you've been in business for a while, but have been like totally ignoring cash flow projections, a good place to start is, looking backwards at what data you do have. If you've been keeping books, look at, when you were making, what months of the year were you making money? What months of the year were you spending money? And what's the breakdown? And you can start working forward on that. Oh, sorry, guys. And then building on it, spreadsheets are amazing. Like, if you can dream it, a spreadsheet can do it, as far as making building in calculations and having spreadsheets reference data so that you can update like one piece of information, like, oh, the price of my cardboard boxes is going up. You can change the price, and you can, if you set up your spreadsheet, it can update all your numbers throughout your year, so you can see what that change will do to your cash flow. Or if one of your wholesale buyers goes out of business, okay, you can basically change a number in one cell, and your spreadsheet can do all the math and all the work for you. And you can say, okay, what does it look like if we lose this one account? And you can get really specific with it. So Nicholas, you kind of touched on a lot of the things to keep in mind, like that other activities, like things happening from your personal life, like how much money do you really need to take out to cover your owner's draw cost of living. Don't forget, if you work a job in the winter, factor that in, because it will definitely affect your cash flow through the months if you're bringing in, $5,000 in the winter. And if you can, like, ideally, a cash flow projection spreadsheet is meant to be updated even in the season, where you can, I don't actually do this, I dream of doing this, but if you had the time, you could go in and enter your actual cash flow for that. After January is done, you can look at your bookkeeping and say, all right, here's what the actual numbers were. This is what I predicted, but this is what actually happened. And how does that play out? So if you had that issue in June, July, where money is really thin, but sales were better than expected in January, you could say, okay, I have a little more in the bank come June and July. Maybe I can give one of the crew members an extra shift a week, because that will really help us out, or something like that. You can make those like mid-season decisions that could improve your season or improve your personal life, whatever it may be. And creating a disaster mode spreadsheet is something we really learned from. It really helped us understand what our worst season could look like and still get us through. And in 2020, when COVID happened, we had no idea what our season was going to be like, but we already had been set up with this really great spreadsheet, and we assumed the worst. We made a spreadsheet as if, none of the restaurants would be open. None of the stores would be buying. If our sales just plummeted, would we make it through? And we just barely had enough cash that we'd be able to pay the bills. If we didn't buy any seeds and didn't pay any labor, we could like slide through. And if I didn't have a spreadsheet and you asked me that, I would be like, there's no way we would have enough cash to get through. But the spreadsheet showed, no, we actually could have. Fortunately, COVID, we got through fine. But it can give you a lot of confidence in your business too. And we have a spreadsheet that was developed for us by Jed Beach, who is a professional consultant, Farm Smart, I believe. I don't know if you, yeah. So he is an awesome farm expert. This is like his absolute, like he's a spreadsheet genius, and so he helped us build this like super detailed cash flow projection sheet, and it gave us a huge boost. Like it educated me so much. And he worked with us to make sure that we understood why we were using it, how to use it. And since then, every year I build on it a little bit more and improve it a little bit more. I found even more shortcuts to build in, and every winter I like teach myself a little bit more about Google Sheets, to the point that it's actually a little bit fun now. Like it was so daunting in the beginning. Yeah. So one thing I feel like I hear a lot is like a lot of us use QuickBooks, or we pay someone to do bookkeeping for us, and it's generally in QuickBooks. Or they get a spreadsheet template that has some like really cool formulas in it, and it's meant to make your life much easier and simpler. So I definitely recommend taking time when you have time to make sure that you're taking advantage of formulas that will automatically calculate and populate cells for you. If you have QuickBooks, making sure that your cash flow projection and your QuickBooks chart of accounts are categorized in the same way, so that when you look at your cash flow projection and you're working on filling in your projections for the year, you can pull up your profit and loss from last year, and it will be in the same order with the same categories. And you can look at last year's and go, okay, I'm going to, make my best guess off of these numbers from last year. This is what's going to increase. This is what's going to decrease. This is what I need to change. And one of the, Courtney had asked what are one of the beginner errors, is that when we started, building cash flow projections and kind of getting an understanding. At the same time, we hired a bookkeeper to help us with bookkeeping and tax prep and accounting, but we didn't share the information with them. So we ended up with a chart of accounts in QuickBooks that was completely different from our cash flow projection. And we were so inexperienced, it didn't even occur to us that we should be sharing more information, and sharing more goals with our bookkeeper. So we weren't taking advantage. We were kind of giving them the bare minimum and receiving the bare minimum back in the reports and things that we're getting back. Just because, they didn't know that we were doing all this extra work, and we didn't know that it would help them. So, making sure it's all just working together, so that when it's time to get organized and, make your plan for the next season, you basically have math formulas doing as much of the work for you. Peer-to-peer. So my ambitious plan for this presentation was that I'd give some examples of our actual spreadsheet and our profit and loss. But it's late August and I didn't get to it. But another thing I've run into, we've going to conferences and workshops and other kind of like educational events, I've noticed that when we share hard numbers, the farmers in the room fixate on the hard, oh, you're making this much off of this crop. How do you do that? What are your, they want to get into the nitty gritty numbers of the farm and how much we're making. But it's natural for our brains to want those like hard concrete answers, but the money that our farm needs to make to support us is completely unique to us. It has to do with our lifestyle. We don't have any kids. Like, it's hard to describe, but every farm is so unique. And the money that you need to make to be profitable and to plan for the future is going to be unique to you. Your enterprise budgets are going to be totally unique to you. My cost to raise a tomato is not the same as my neighbor's cost to raise a tomato, because there are just so many fine details about our markets, about the tools we have, the space we have, the soil we have. There are just, so many different factors. So I see a lot of people trying to really look for a blueprint that they can replicate to be successful. And my advice is, don't look for the blueprint. Look for the tools that those farms or small businesses used to overcome certain challenges and to, really craft their own farm and their own model. And there's success to be had in being a quarter acre or smaller market farm. There's success to be had in being a commercial broccoli farm in the county. There's room for every scale of farm in Maine, but you need to find what works with your resources, your space, your markets, your personal life. So, hold on to the big concepts, but understand that your plan is just going to be totally unique to you. And yeah, cash flow projections are all about cash, but there are a lot of other factors to think about, so that sample cash flow projection that we looked at, that we were tweaking the numbers of sales and when the sales happened, and are we going to borrow money from grandma? Are we not? That is a really useful tool, especially if you are thinking about making a big infrastructure purchase or changing your model to focus on a different crop or a different market. But one of the things we have definitely learned with shifting our model is that there's more than just the cash flow to keep in mind. And there's kind of like a butterfly effect. Every big change you make, even some small changes, affects so many different things on your farm, like time. So in the past, since 2020, we've made some huge purchases of mechanized equipment that mechanize, harvest and transplant. And it's been game changing. But we were warned that, buying a big new piece of equipment, you need a lot of time to like figure out how it works with your soil. And it definitely took even more time than we expected. And we're still learning. We have all these new toys. They're really fun and exciting, but we're still figuring out how to use them best, what we need to do, like what soil prep we really need to do and how much of a difference it can make. And it's all working out, but we're learning now that we need to give ourselves, we've decided now, it's like if you buy a huge piece of equipment, don't plan on seeing the results in the first season. You need a season to learn it. Same with inputs. Our seed bill has actually gone down because we've become so much more precise in our planting, and we're able to actually buy just what we need. We used to overspend on seeds because our system wasn't efficient. So that was a really, positive thing. But if you buy a piece of equipment that's going to allow you to go from growing half an acre of winter squash to 3 acres of winter squash. If you grow it on black plastic, that's a lot of black plastic to buy in the spring when your cash flow might be low. So you have to think about those little changes that could actually have like an exponential effect on your cash flow. Because again, the timing really is everything. You know, as we were tweaking the cash flow projection, you could kind of see like June and July could go into the red very easily. And what were we going to do to keep it, to keep cash flow positive? That is extremely accurate to our season, because in the spring, we have basically sold out of crops. We start spending the money on seeds, propane in our greenhouse. You know, we put out so much of our cash, our time, our energy, and our bank account dips, and it's at its lowest in July every year. But every year the lowest point is higher than the previous year, because we're planning better, we're becoming more profitable. But we know July will always be the bottom point of the cash flow. And in years when, we didn't have our model dialed in, we weren't as profitable, a lot of times we look towards like outside sources of cash, So there was a season we put a lot on a credit card, and then we had to really struggle to pay that off before the interest killed us. There was a season that we did get a small personal loan, and that just kept us, positive through that month. And then we were able to pay it off really quickly in like August or September, because then the cash from the crops started really flowing back in. But then as we got into our model more and we started using enterprise budgets more, which need their whole own workshop, we realized that, some of the crops that were bringing a lot of cash in actually weren't that profitable. And when we took them out of the model, even though it seemed impossible, like tomatoes, we don't grow a single tomato anymore. They used to be a really big player in our cash flow. So we thought, well, of course we can't drop tomatoes. That would be crazy. In fact, we were trying to increase tomato production. But we realized that they actually really weren't profitable, because our markets were in Boston. We were driving twice a week to Boston just to deliver tomatoes to Boston. And the gas alone was just, really kind of killing us. And the time that one of us was off the farm going to Boston twice a week. We still sell produce in Massachusetts, but now we only go once a week. We don't go nearly as frequently throughout the season. We cut tomatoes out altogether. And it turned out to be not nearly as profitable as we thought. And now we have so much time to focus on our fall crops, which really are profitable, because we're not picking tomatoes all August, spending hours and hours and hours paying people to pick tomatoes. It really wasn't the moneymaker we thought it was. Space. If you build your infrastructure larger so that you can produce more crops, do you have a place to put those crops? This is something that we're learning. We've scaled up our model to serve wholesale markets. We're increasing our field yields, which is like so exciting that we're getting more out of every bed foot than we used to. But we are literally out of space in our barn for our crops, which, we knew we were like close to that. We knew we were dancing that dance when we started buying like larger equipment. But that's still a problem we're not really sure how we're going to solve, because we want to keep moving. We want to keep, increasing our onion and potato production. But that means we have to build a barn, buy a barn, you know, to be continued. But yeah, as you grow, all sorts of needs grow. Soil, just a personal note, you know, something that we are getting out of our model of becoming more efficient and focusing on wholesale is that we have more personal time, which was really important to us because our previous model was totally running us into the ground emotionally, physically. But we also have time for hobbies a little bit, just a little bit. And we have a lot more time to think about our cover crop program and giving fields, you know, like we'd like cover crop for half a season and sneak a crop into a field, even though it really needed the whole season. So we're taking that extra time we're buying ourselves to think about those things. How can we not just do the bare minimum for soil building, but how can we actually do like the best we really can? Um, all right. These notes, I feel like I kind of covered that a lot, but if you are planning, if you're using your cash flow projection sheet to factor in this new piece of infrastructure, this new big upgrade, again, just thinking about all the extra details that go into becoming more efficient. And if you buy this amazing mechanized transplanter, do you really want to harvest everything you're going to plant by hand if you're like increasing your scale? So making sure that the upgrades you're planning don't just cash flow, but they also logistically flow with your season. And if everyone loves your hot peppers, you're like selling a lot of them, it's kind of one of your signature items, so you want to increase scale, do that. But there's also probably a ceiling to how many hot peppers you can sell to the market, so thinking about the top end of scale for a crop, and ask yourself, do you need the biggest tool available, or do you need just maybe an intermediate upgrade to help you get more efficient? Like I grow a lot of herbs. I know I'm never going to be able to grow like an acre of herbs. But I know we can grow all the onions we possibly can fit in our little barn, because all of our buyers for years have expressed they will take more onions. So we feel really confident in that market. Keep your goals flexible. We have made a lot of infrastructure upgrades over the years, and we're not done yet. We know we're not done yet. And one of the best kind of accidental exercises for our farm has been applying for grants that we didn't receive. But the process of applying for the grant, of thinking about, okay, what tools would we want? Why do we want them? How would it help us? Making a cash flow projection specifically for the grant application to demonstrate, all right, if we receive these pieces of equipment, here's the impact it will have on our sales and our profitability. Going through that whole process, even though we didn't end up getting the grant in the end, it made a plan for us to follow. We're not following it as fast as the grant would have allowed. We've applied for grants where we would have bought, all of these really fun, cool tools for onions in one season. And to be honest, that probably would have been extremely overwhelming. But now we're using that kind of as a template, and we're looking at this list of things we wanted to buy, and we're saying, okay, well, we can buy them in the future, and what order do we want to buy them in? What makes the most sense? Um, so some of the things we bought a mechanical transplanter, which was a huge upgrade, because we were planting our entire onion crop by hand, because a water wheel transplanter, we didn't have wheels with close enough spacing for onions. So we were spending like 2 weeks in the spring planting onions by hand. And now this very fancy Italian machine does, it still takes us a week to plant onions, but we're planting over 10 times as many onions. And it's a lot more pleasant and a lot easier for us. And, we got that first before, like, we still don't really have an onion harvester. We have kind of a better system, but we knew that would make sense, even though we're still doing a lot of hand harvesting. And then we bought a cultivator that is a mechanical cultivator, but it requires your rows to be mechanically transplanted so that they're always, every set of plants in the bed are the exact same distance from each other. Because the way the set of cultivators move, you really need that accuracy. So we realized, even though the cultivator cost a lot less, we had to get the transplanter first for the cultivator to really work for us. And then this year, we bought an upgrade for the cultivator, which has a computer on it. So I used to steer the cultivator sitting on the back. And now we have basically a very fancy AI camera that does that for me. So I don't even need to be on the tractor anymore. Jim can cultivate on his own, and we've just gained so much time. And I just don't have to sit on the back of a tractor making these micro adjustments for like 8 hours at a time. But we really had to think about the order, and it was a little bit counterintuitive, because we bought this huge transplanter. We had to buy a tractor big enough to tow it. And at first glance, that would have seemed like the last thing you would add, because everything else is less expensive. But not every tool would have been usable until we had that in the picture. Yeah, so be ready for opportunity. A cash flow projection will allow you to plan for a great year, a crappy year, a mediocre year, and having an updated, realistic, achievable cash flow projection will help you take advantage of things like grants that come up, applying for a loan. If you can really demonstrate that you do understand your business, that you understand what your business needs, and that you understand that, how a loan or grant funding will affect your cash flow, you are such a reliable candidate. And I mean, during COVID, there were so many relief programs, so many grants, so many loan opportunities, and some of our peers were not able to take advantage of them because they didn't have their projections up to date and didn't have their bookkeeping up to date. And those that did were able to, like, jump in the pool as soon as possible. So it really sets you up for being really flexible, and taking advantage of things that come up. So, and I think that, oh yeah, more photos. So another part of being ready for opportunity is, some upgrades really don't require much other than knowing what you need. So this is our irrigation truck, and it is absolutely scrapped together with things that we've had on the farm or found. And we bought this truck from our neighbor for, I think $1,500. The water tank was like $700. And we had this dream of a water truck before it really came together. And just knowing that we wanted it and knowing that it would be really helpful for the farm helped us be ready to just kind of like, we picked up each piece as it became available to us. And then one winter we realized we kind of had everything to put together, and this truck was born. And it allows us to fill the tank with water, drive it to a field, and feed drip tape, just gravity feed. We don't need a pump, it just feeds on its own. And it saves so much time. And then this is the transplanter and tractor I was referring to, this really big purchase. But this transplanter plants 2 rows of plants in a bed. I sit in this little seat and I put plants in this little round carousel, and I have my trays of plants on these racks. And it also lays out fertilizer into the 2 rows as it's planting. And so it's taking what was, multiple tasks and putting them into one. Oh, and it can also lay drip tape. So this was just like a huge step forward for us. And it was a really big purchase. And then this is the version of the cultivator where I have to sit on the back and use these little bike handles to steer. And the cultivators and finger weeders in the back are set up. They were set up at the factory for our, based on our transplanter setup. And the folks at Colt were familiar with the transplanter. So basically we just gave them all the details and they made sure that it was going to work really well for us. So that was a really, big move. And this piece costs a fraction of what the transplanter did. But again, if we had bought the cultivator first, we wouldn't really have been able to use it. And this is the upgrade that we got this year. So it's actually the same cultivators, but instead of that bike seat, it's now being moved by a computer system and this hydraulic arm. So there's a camera in the center that can identify the squash plants, and then it knows everything else other than a squash plant is a weed, and it moves the whole head of cultivators together to weed everything around it. And it can identify, if you have red lettuce, you can teach it over time what your plants look like, and it will actually learn and become more accurate. So that was our big step this year. And then it rained so much we couldn't really use it because it's so heavy. You can't really put it in a really wet field, but next year we're going to be ready. Yeah, so that's what I've got, and we're at 7:30 now. But if folks have questions, I'd love to answer them.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, Hannah. I'm so glad you threw in the photos too. That's just brings a lot of it to life.
We need a visual break for our eyes. Yeah.
So much better than my grid of spreadsheets. Yeah. I do want to, at Anna Mueller's request, who's my peer here at MOFGA, I want to put out this poll. Hopefully, do you see that on your screens, those of you on Zoom? Some of it's for the programs that MOFGA puts on. We need to do some reporting and just generally, did you increase your understanding? Da 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 da. Will you implement anything you learned? Da da da. So, if those of you who attended could answer that poll, that would just be lovely. looks like.
It's also really nice to hear, Hannah, how your farm is thriving at this point.
Thank you, Jen. I was wondering if this was my friend Jen.
It is your friend, Jen.
Good. Nice to hear your voice. And I hope you're thriving as well.
Getting there.
Yeah, I miss going to farmers markets a lot, but my bank account does not miss it.
Understandable.
Yeah. I'm gonna see you in Belfast someday.
I hope so. Okay, so thank you both. I'm gonna head out.
Yeah, without any
Thanks, man.
further questions, I think we can call it a night. Thank you, folks who were here. Thank you, Hannah.
Yeah, thank you, Nicholas and Anna, for organizing this.
It's like you emphasize, it's so great to learn peer to peer, just to hear what other farmers are doing and what they've learned. Appreciate it so much. Okay, I'm going to end. Thank you all. Have a good night.